Please pray with me. Father above, I ask this evening that you would let us see the heart of your Son. I ask that you would soften our hearts to respond to his call of love. And Lord, where there is pride that prevents us from pursuing you, I ask that you would take it away. Where there are false loves that prevent us from pursuing you, I ask that you would strip them away. Lord, may we be close to your Son. Amen. To a certain extent, we can all identify with the Canaanite woman in this passage. And you may look at me and say, what in the world do you mean? I can't identify with her at all. But we all know what it feels like to pray desperately for someone that we love. We all know what it feels like to pray for somebody that we love and to beg the Lord, Lord, heal this person. Whether it's a physical illness that we're talking about, or it's a broken relationship between people we love, whether it's our parents or our children, whether it's a brother or sister, we know what it means to look at somebody else we love and say, Lord, their life is falling apart. Won't you show up? Won't you heal them? We all know what it means to cry out, Lord, have mercy upon that person, because everything is all wrong in their life. Many of us have cried that same prayer for ourselves, saying, Lord, won't you show up? Won't you heal me? Won't you deliver me from this situation? Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. We know what it feels like to be like the Canaanite woman and to cry out, Lord, please show up here. We need you. But we also know what it feels like the Canaanite woman, to be met with the silence of God. Because there are many of us who have cried out, Lord, heal this person that I love. Show up in my life. And it seems like there is no response to that prayer. That cry for mercy that we see coming from her lips, and then the silence of Jesus that follows, is something that we all know and we've all experienced. This passage is a difficult passage. In fact, it's one that probably would be easier to avoid. It's a difficult passage. But it's not just difficult because Jesus is silent or he seems cold and uncaring in it. It's difficult because if we listen with the heart, it reminds us of the prayers that we have prayed that seem to have fallen on deaf ears. It reminds us of the place where we have confronted the silence of God. Jesus has gone into Gentile territory after a dispute with the Pharisees and the scribes. And as he goes out into Gentile territory, a Canaanite woman comes out of her town seeking him. Canaanite's an Old Testament term. Canaanite means idolater, the worst sort of evil. This woman represents all that's wrong in the world. And she comes out of her town seeking Jesus. And she's crying out to him with the Jewish titles, all of the right titles. She's seeking the Jewish Messiah. Son of David, Lord, she says, have mercy on me. She's crying out for mercy because her daughter is tormented by a demon. And Jesus is silent. He seemingly ignores her. And so she persists, following after, crying out, have mercy on me, until the disciples take Jesus aside and say, Lord, you're going to have to deal with this situation. She's driving us crazy. Could you get her off her back? Take care of this. But Jesus turns and says to them, my mission is to the lost sheep of Israel. He gives his disciples a theological explanation for his silence. It's easy enough to explain. God's plan was to build a nation, to save a nation, to choose a nation, the Jews, and to show his salvation to that nation so that then they would take it out to the ends of the earth. He was working through the Jews for the salvation of the world. This is what Jesus says in John 4. Salvation is from the Jews. As Paul says in Romans 1, the gospel is the power of God for salvation to the Jew first and to the Greek. The point is, in the moment of salvation history that Jesus is standing in, it's not time yet to go out to the Gentiles. That comes after Pentecost. Right now, I'm after the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I'm transforming and redeeming them so that they will be sent out. It's not time yet to go out. There are exceptions. We heard an exception in Isaiah 56, where in verse 6 it speaks of foreigners who bind themselves to the house of the Lord, who serve the Lord. There have been exceptions in the Old Testament. Naaman, the general of the Syrians, the great enemy of Israel, showed up at Elisha's doorstep begging for healing from leprosy. There have been exceptions. Even Canaanite women have been exceptions. Matthew mentions 2 of them at the very beginning of his gospel, who are actually in the genealogy of Jesus. There have been exceptions. But the whole plan of God, on the whole, is to the Jew first and then out to the rest of the world. And Jesus offers this theological explanation to his disciples for why he's not paying attention to this woman. The theological explanation might have made sense to the disciples, but you wouldn't be shocked to discover that it didn't satisfy her mother's heart. She heard the explanation and she persists. Lord, help me. I don't care about your theological explanations and the grand plan of salvation. My daughter is hurting. Help me. She persists. And so Jesus finally speaks to her. He speaks to her and he says, it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. This is shocking. It seems so unfeeling. How can he compare her to a dog? Dogs weren't family pets in this world. They were called vermin. They were scavengers. They were wild creatures that ate the garbage out of the streets and that attacked little kids if they weren't guarded and protected. How can Jesus compare her to this? And yet, remarkably, this woman doesn't despair. She doesn't get frustrated. And the most remarkable combination of cleverness, of faith, and of guts, she says, in effect, you can call me a dog. Just let me eat the crumbs that fall from your table. I'm okay with this arrangement. She turns the table on Jesus. Her wordplay is lost in the translation, but her wit is beautiful. Jesus uses the word little dogs. And she says, okay, if I'm a little dog, and then she uses the word little crumbs, then I get the little crumbs. And she repeats the word Lord, because in Greek the word Lord sounds like the word dog. She's punning and playing with words, throwing it right back in his face. Her wit is beautiful, full of puns and verbal cleverness. But the only thing more beautiful than her wit is her faith. And so Jesus looks at her and says, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." She got what she wanted. She became one of those Canaanite women included in the story of God. She became an exception to God's ordered plan of salvation history, to the Jew first and then to the Greek. And Jesus praised her. But of course, the fact that she got what she wanted doesn't make it much easier to understand Jesus' treatment of her. How could he be silent to her at first? How could he push her away? How could he compare her to a dog? It seems so harsh and cold and unfeeling. I want to suggest to you, though, this evening, that from the very beginning of this passage, this Canaanite woman is not being met with harshness or cruelty. I want to suggest to you that from the very beginning of this passage, this Canaanite woman is being met with the tender love of Jesus. From the very beginning of this passage, Jesus is building her up and holding her up in front of his disciples as the epitome of what a faithful disciple looks like. I want to suggest to you that Jesus wasn't in a bad mood, and he wasn't unwilling to help. He wasn't only persuaded because the woman was so persistent and so witty. I want to suggest to you all this evening that he was confronting her with love. that he was confronting her with love, even when it seems inexplicable to us, that he was confronting her with love, and that he was using her to show his disciples what faithful discipleship looks like. That second part is easier to demonstrate, that he was using her to show his disciples what faithful discipleship looked like. We'll start with that one because it's easier. This woman is foreshadowed at the very beginning of Matthew by the fact that Matthew includes those two Canaanite women in the genealogy of Jesus, Tamar and Rahab. Two women who, in spite of their idolatrous and wicked culture, who were included in the people of God and even included in the genealogy of Jesus. Tamar, because she was more upright than Judah, the patriarch, and his sons. And Rahab, because she trusted in God for salvation, and because she protected the Israelite soldiers. Canaanite would have been a slur to the Jews because of their idolatry. But it's striking that in Matthew, the only time Canaanite is mentioned, it's talking about a person who's been redeemed. The person who's listening carefully as they read, when they hear the description Canaanite women, would immediately start going, how's she going to get saved? How's she going to get saved? I know that's what happened to Canaanite women in Matthew. Jesus praises this woman's faith. He's holding her up as the epitome of faithful discipleship. He praises her faith in front of the 12 disciples. Just a moment ago, when Peter started sinking in the water, Jesus looked at Peter and said, "You have little faith." And then he turns in front of Peter and says to this woman, "You have great faith." Listen to the way that he's elevating her. He's not treating her harshly. He's elevating her and pointing her to the disciples, saying, this is what discipleship looks like. It's true, he spars with her verbally. He spars with her verbally in front of the disciples, almost to demonstrate to them, watch, let me show you what someone who's faithfully pursuing me does. Let me show you how they seek me. And he spars with her verbally, but it's so pronounced because he's just sparred with the Pharisees and the scribes verbally, and the only thing they did was criticize Jesus. And he's about to spar with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the only thing they're going to do is question him and demand a sign. This woman spars with him, but she spars with him in faith and in love. She's like Jacob wrestling with the angel, wrestling with God, but wrestling with God not in anger, but in faithfulness. And Jesus wrestling right back is him showing the other disciples, look at this disciple. She knows how to approach God. She knows how to come after me and pursue me and seek me. She demonstrates faith, reckless pursuit of Jesus, submission. She refuses to go home. She persists. She trusts Jesus at all cost. And so Jesus honors her in front of the disciples for it. He's wrestled with her, and he's shown the other disciples that this is what faithful discipleship looks like. Wrestle with me, but fight in humility and faith and love. He holds her up as this is faithful discipleship. And these Jewish men, these 12, learn from this Canaanite woman, just as Judah, the patriarch, learned from another Canaanite woman, Tamar, when he said, she is more righteous than me. Jesus holds her up as an example of faithful discipleship because she wrestles with him in love and faith and humility. But I want to go back to that first point, because Jesus is doing more than just demonstrating faithful discipleship. In other words, he's not just using her as an object lesson. Hey, look, this woman's coming. She's got faith. I can use her to teach my disciples something. That might be honoring to her that she's worthy of it. But he shows her love and tenderness. He cares about her for her own sake. He meets her with his tender love from the beginning. This may strike you as strange, because it sure doesn't feel like love when he's silent. And it sure doesn't feel like love when he compares her to a dog. But I want to start with two premises to let you see this. The first premise is very simple. Jesus knows us. Jesus knows us. He knows our weaknesses. He knows the broken places in our soul. He knows where we struggle to believe. He knows the things that we long to see come true. He knows our needs. He knows where we're loving the wrong things. The second thing that I want to start with is the other premise that Jesus will be satisfied with nothing less than us letting go of all that is false and proud and evil in our lives. He knows us, and he's satisfied with nothing less than us relinquishing our hold on everything that is evil and wicked, on all false loves. He knows that our pride will destroy us. He knows that our idolatry will destroy us. He knows that the false loves that we have will destroy us. He wants us completely healed, at rest in him, safe in his love. And he knows that the direction of our heart is to all the wrong things. Those are my two premises. He knows us, and he wants us completely healed and free of those evil things, at rest in him. Based on the fact that he knows this woman, based on the fact that he wants her healed in his love, this whole verbal interchange takes on a different character. Because this isn't Jesus being harsh and ugly. This is instead Jesus testing a woman. It's him examining a woman, and it's him challenging her. He's bringing her on in the faith to the point where she gets to the point of saying, even Lord, if you call me a dog, I just want to live under your table. He gives her a chance through these questions and these challenges to begin to let go of her pride, to begin to let go of her false loves, to begin to let go of her self-love, so that at the very end of this dialogue, the only thing that remains is her desire to be in Jesus' house. This dialogue is not harshness, but it's the love of Jesus stripping her of all those things that would destroy her, till she gets to the point of saying, can I just sleep under your table? I'd be satisfied with that. She cries out for mercy, and he's silent to her. It's like he's challenging her, saying, do you just want my blessing, or do you want me? She cries out for mercy, and he, in his silence, is effect saying, will you follow? Because I'm not going to give you what you want right away. You remember the parable of the soils? The thin soil with rocky ground underneath, the seed that sprouts quickly. When it sprouts too quickly, as soon as trouble comes around, it withers. And it's like he's saying, I'm not going to let you be thin soil. I love you too much for that. I'm going to make you follow me, and we're going to plow a little deeper here. He's challenging her to deeper faith, and she persists. He puts her off again, telling his disciples, I've got a different mission. He's examining her. He's challenging her in love. But she steps forward again, asking for his help, whatever it would be. And so he raises the bar. And he raises the bar to the place where we go, how is that fair? Because he raises the bar and says, you're not worthy of what I have to offer. This is what the metaphor of dog means, after all. You're not worthy. You're not worthy of what I have to offer. And as harsh as it sounds to us, this is love. Because long as she thinks she deserves what she gets from Jesus, she's deceived and she's in danger. As long as she thinks she's owed everything she gets, this will end up in her destruction. And so Jesus, who's rooted out the thin faith that just wants the blessing of God, but will fall away later, and has deepened her faith, brings her to the place where effectively he says, will you admit that you aren't worthy? Will you admit that you're a dog? He offers her the chance to humble herself before her Creator. Now, this woman's not the only one who gets one of those offers. Throughout the Gospels, we see people come up to Jesus saying, I want this from you, I'll follow you. And Jesus usually lays an offer at their feet that is really difficult to comprehend. Give away all your possessions. Basically, do you love me more than your money? I don't have anywhere to lay my head. Do you love me more than your comfort? Am I really worth that much to you? The choice that he lays in front of this woman is the choice of self-worth. Are you willing to enter my house at the very bottom? Would you come in as a dog? Her response is so beautiful. As long as I can eat the crumbs, as long as I can eat the crumbs, I'll come in that way. In other words, she says to him as he deepens her faith and asks these questions, I want you more than I want my own dignity. She says to him, I want you more than I want my own status. She says to him, I want you more, whatever it costs. It's like the psalmist in Psalm 84, who says, I would rather be a servant who sleeps at the doorway of the house of God than have all the wealth of the tents of wickedness. Make me a servant if that's what it takes. I want to come in even if I'm despised, even if I'm worth nothing. He's led her on in love till even her self-worth has been dropped away, and the only thing that exists in her mind now is Jesus. This is the beauty of this story. This is this wrestling in love. It sounds harsh to us, but he's seen exactly what would eat her faith away, and he stripped it away to where she gets to the point to say, I don't care the terms. It doesn't matter to me. As long as I get to live in your house, I'm content. Just bring me into your house. I don't care the terms. And Jesus looks at her at that moment, and he explodes and says, oh, woman. And we go, what? It's worth remembering that the only women in the Bible who get that term are Eve and Mary. In other words, he just vaulted her up into the class. Eve, when Adam saw her fresh after creation, and says, woman, out of sheer delight. And Mary, when Jesus looks at her at the wedding feast at Cana and says, woman, you know, it's not my time to be glorified, but I'm still going to listen to you and turn this water to wine. The only two women who get that exclamation, and this Canaanite woman gets vaulted into that class because her faith was so rich and deep, and she said, I want Jesus no matter what he costs. And so Jesus says, oh, woman, you've got it. This is it. This verbal sparring and this wrestling has led her to the place where she says, I don't care about anything else. Just let me stay in your house. And so Jesus looks at her and says, your faith is great. Peter, look at this. This is what you should have been like. Again, he's using her to demonstrate to the disciples what faith should look like, but he's praising her to her face. Your faith is great. This whole incident, rather than being harsh, is his care and his love for this woman. She comes to him with a prayer request, and before he deals with the prayer request, he roots out all that would destroy her faith. So the question that I have for y'all, and this is the question that I had for myself as I wrestled with this today, is I come to Jesus with plenty of prayer requests. And I think I'm usually fairly blind to the things that needed to be rooted out, lest my faith get shipwrecked. Jesus saw through to the heart of this woman and knew where he needed to bring her so that the only thing left that mattered was Jesus. We come with our prayer requests, and Jesus oftentimes says no, or is silent. And there are many reasons for that. But one of them is that there are things in our life that need to be rooted out before he gives us what we long for. And so the question to us is, if we were in the place of that woman, what would Jesus begin to root out of our lives? What needs to be pulled away so that the only thing that's left is just let me live in your house. I'll come no matter the terms. I don't know the answers for all of y'all. I'm beginning perhaps to see a few of them for me. The things that need to be rooted out so that the only thing that's left is a love for Jesus. Is it pride? The desire to be seen as somebody? Is it a desire for comfort or for pleasure? Is it a longing to get your way and to be listened to by others? Is it the need to be in control? There are so many things that we're clinging to. And Jesus, in effect, would say, I can't give you that prayer request or that blessing with that still in your hands. Because if I support that thing that you're hanging on to, it will destroy you. Remember the two premises? He loves us. He knows us. He knows us. He wants us to be healed in his love. He knows us. He loves us. And so as you're confronted by him with these things where you go, Lord, why are you silent? Or why are you pulling this thing away from me? Our reaction usually is to get frustrated or angry. We might actually be coming to a place where we're offered the chance to wrestle with God in faithfulness, the chance to grow in our love. He loves us. He knows us, and He would heal us. As you come, and as you are challenged by the Lord, take comfort in the fact that He delights when His children wrestle with Him in faithfulness and humility and love. He's not threatened by that at all. When His children fight back in faithfulness and humility and love, He's delighted to argue with them, to wrestle with them, to verbally spar with them. It's when we think we know best that things start to go south. And so the call of this passage is the call to come to the Lord who knows you and loves you. And when He begins to pry away the things that need to be pried away for your salvation, to say, Lord, you can have them. Just let me live in your house. I'm content under the table if that's what it takes. Amen.